we're going to talk about VLANs, virtual local area networks, and really show you how to configure VLANs and set up VLANs on switches. Now you will see that this is the first time we'll actually use command line interface to update, to make some configuration changes to the switches as well as the routers. But a lot of these configuration changes will actually be on the switch. Now what we're going to do on the routers is configure 802.1q virtual interfaces. Sometimes they're called virtual interfaces, sometimes they're called sub interfaces. And what this allows your router to be able to do is to understand which VLANs are talking to which and how to route packages based on these sub interfaces. Okay, let's get into this. First thing we have to do, we're going to basically reconfigure our network a little bit. Now, I'm only going to work with the first floor, only using the first floor for the sake of time. So now, instead of having both of our switches connecting to the interfaces, the gigabit interfaces on the router, we're gonna change this up a little bit. So we're gonna remove this line right here, and what we're going to do, let's drag this down a little bit. So we're actually going to connect these two switches together. One switch will be connected, the delivery switch, to the router, and now the two switches will now be connected together. Now what we're going to use to connect these together is a crossover cable. So if we go to our cables, so here's a copper crossover. Up until this point we've been using a straight through, so we're going to grab a crossover cable, and we're going to go from, and we're going to use the gigabit Ethernet interface, not one of the fast, but the gigabit from that switch, the delivery switch, to the gigabit internet interface of the kitchen switch. So we hook those together. So now we've got a kind of a different looking configuration than we've had previously. This next thing we're going to do, we're going to go to our router, and we're going to remove the IP addresses from the gigabit internet interfaces, on this router. So currently, like I said, we've got .1 and .65 that's loaded. So we're going to remove both of those. We'll do it from command line. Like I said, I try to do as much as I can from command line so that you guys get used to seeing command line itself. All right. So, and right now, let me just exit out of here. So kind of see where we're at. We're at the config, and you again tell it which interface we want to configure. We're just going to do G000. Okay. And what we're just going to type is no IP address. And what that does, that removes the IP address. Exit. And now we're going to configure interface G011. Oh, 01, I'm sorry, 01. And the same thing, no IP address. That removes the IP addresses from the interface. And let's just do this. Let's do a show run just so that we can see if it works. There's my DHCP pools that we created earlier, and then look, there's we still have an IP address in our serial, but there are no IP addresses in either of the gigabit internet interfaces. All right, so what do we do now? Now that we got those IP addresses out, we're going to come back and we're going to make some changes to the router in a minute. But now we're going to make some updates. We're going to make some configuration changes to our switches. So we would program all of these switches the same. Okay. Here again, I'm just going to do the delivery switch and the kitchen switch. So we just go into this to the switch. Same thing. Going and the CLI commands, whether it's the router or if it's a Cisco switch, they all work basically the same. I'm going to configure mode. Now what we're going to do, we're going to set up two VLANs. Two VLAN groups. The VLAN group of the range for the first one are going to be the fast Ethernet ports 1 through 10. And then for the second group is going to be the Ethernet ports 11 through 20. So what we're going to type in here is interface range, and we're talking fast Ethernet 0, 1 through 10. Okay, so while we're here, we're also going to go into switch port mode. Okay, switch port mode is now what allows us to set up this switch port accessing, which actually lets us create a VLAN, the actual VLAN. So once we go into switch port, you just type in switch port mode access. Okay, that's the switch port mode access mode. Once we are there, now the next thing we're going to do is actually set up a VLAN. Switch port access VLAN, and we're going to number this one 20. Okay, VLAN 20. And so I say currently does not exist, creating VLAN 20. Exit. And now we're going to do the same thing for our next set of switch ports that we're going to put into our next VLAN. So the interface range is going to be the fast 0, 11 through 20. Switch port mode, we go into the access mode. Switch port access, and this will be VLAN. We're going to just make it 30. So this is, again, the VLAN did not exist, so it's creating that VLAN. I'm going to exit again, and now we need to set up how to trunk these two together. So we have to tell it which ports we want to use on the switch to be able to do trunking between the two, so we can so that the 802.11.1q actually knows where to, which switch is talking to the network. Again, very similar. The interface range. Now this is going to be the gigabit 0, 1 through 2. So like I said, so these are the two gigabit interfaces that we'll be able to use to configure as for trunking. And from here we just type in switch port mode, and the mode is not access now, but the mode is actually trunk. So we want these used for trunking. The other ports that we configured where the access mode, the mode was set to access, is used for passing data traffic to a device or a client or host. Okay, so you see that the status, the updates that have changed on these devices. So we're going to exit, and now what we'll do, just to see if it took, we're going to do a show run like we've done, just like we did with the routers. Okay, so now when we look at our ports, so Ethernet port 1 is in VLAN 20, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're all in VLAN 20, and then we get the interface fast Ethernet 11, and now you see these from 11 all the way down to 20 are in VLAN 30. And this is a 24 port switch, so these other 4 ports are not in either of the VLANs. As well as we see, we have 2 gigabit Ethernet ports, 1 and 2, that are in trunk mode. So this is how we would set up our switch. We're going to go to the kitchen switch and basically do the exact same thing, just like we just what we did before. And we'll set this one up for the same thing. INT range F0/1 through 10. Switch port mode. It's going to be access, the access mode, not trunk. And switch port access. That's VLAN 20. All right. Exit out of that, brings us back. And now the interface range for fast Ethernet 0, 11 through 20. Okay. Switch port, the mode again is access mode. So, let's try this again. TC switch port access. It's going to be VLAN 30. Exit, and again we got to set up our trunking. The interface range G0, 1, and 2, our 2 gigabit. The mode for these are trunk. We'll do the show run, and again up through 10 is in port 10 is in VLAN 20. The others are in VLAN 30. Okay, so we've got our VLANs established in our switches. And you can, when you scroll over the top, you see now they're no longer all in VLAN 1 or in the default VLAN, but they're broken up. So we're looking good on our switches. Now we're going to go back to our router, and we're going to build our sub interfaces or our virtual interfaces. So if we go back to the router, and go back into the configure mode on our router. And the thing here again, we're going to configure interface. And now this is going to be a sub interface. It's going to be G0/0/0/0, and I'm going to call it .20 because this virtual interface is going to marry up with VLAN 20. So now it takes us into configure our sub interface, and we're going to encapsulate using .1. That's a 1 Q, and it's for VLAN 20. Okay, now we're going to add an IP address because we still have to have an IP address for every interface. Even though it's a virtual interface, still have to have an IP address. So we're going to do IP, where we add an IP address, 192.168.10. That's 1. Okay, for that sub interface, and a subnet mask 255.255.255.192. Okay. Exit, and now we're going to configure we've configured that interface. Now, if you notice, we're only using one physical interface on the router. Okay, so that's the great thing about the virtual interfaces. You can have multiple virtual interfaces on one physical interface on the router. So really we're going to go do the same thing. With interface G0/0/0. And now we're going to actually set this one up for our next VLAN, our other VLAN. Okay, so now we're going to build a second sub VLAN, G0/0/0.30. Okay. Excuse me. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do encapsulation using .1Q, and it's going to be for the VLAN 30. And we'll add an IP address, 192.168.10. And for this one, which is our delivery side, we're going to use .65. That's going to be the IP address for this virtual interface with a subnet mask 255.255.255.224. And exit. Now let's do a show run and see what we look like on our interfaces and how we've configured them. So as you see on this physical interface, there's no IP address. But what we've done, we have set up two virtual interfaces. Okay, two virtual interfaces. Now on 0/01 interface on this router, there's nothing connected. So now both of these two switches and the VLANs, they both connect to one interface on that router. They all connect to the same interface on the router. So in effect now, what we have set up, we've got different computers now. We could now, instead of let's say if we wanted to have all the managers on their own VLAN. So instead of having the kitchen manager on the same on VLAN 20, let's put the kitchen manager on fast Ethernet 11. And likewise, we put the delivery manager on this one on Ethernet 11. So now the managers are all on the same VLAN. All the everyone else is on a separate VLAN. We could have just had a VLAN for printers. We could have taken these last four ports that we didn't use, that we didn't set up in VLANs, and we could set up another VLAN just for printers. That way all your printers would be in the same VLAN. And that's something from a security perspective we do quite often. But anyway, that shows you how to walk through and set up a VLANs across two switches and trunk the switches. This is your 802.1Q is doing the encapsulation and data tagging between the VLANs to know which systems should talk to which systems on the network.